Hi and welcome to this week's assembly. It's Anti-Bullying Week 2021 and I hope if you're watching this on November 15th you're wearing your odd socks to support the occasion. This assembly is going to focus on a specific type of bullying and that's anti-LGBT plus bullying. And the aim of the assembly is for you to come up with an understanding of what anti-LGBT plus bullying is and why it's harmful, and to understand what we can all do to help make our school a safer place for LGBT plus people. LGBT stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people. However, it's recognised that those four letters do not necessarily include all of those whose sexuality is not heterosexual, or whose gender identity is not based on a traditional gender binary. The plus symbol that is therefore used to include people whose identities do not fit typical binary notions of male and female, or who identify themselves using other categories to describe their gender identity or their own understanding of their sexuality. This will include, for example, people who identify themselves as queer, a general term describing people not fitting into the existing norms; questioning, people who explore their sexual orientation and or gender identity; or pansexual, people who are attracted to all sexes and genders. It should be remembered, however, that some people may not want to identify themselves with any existing category. School can be a challenging place for any pupil, but many LGBT plus young people face an alarming amount of bullying and harassment. Homophobic and biphobic bullying is where people are discriminated against and treated unfairly by other people because they are lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, questioning or perceived to be. People who are not lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans or questioning can also experience homophobic and biphobic bullying if someone thinks that they are. Transphobic bullying is where people are discriminated against and treated unfairly by other people because their gender identity doesn't align with the sex they were assigned at birth, or perhaps because they do not conform to stereotyped gender roles or norms. Like all forms of bullying, homophobic bullying can be through name-calling, spreading rumours, online bullying, physical, sexual or emotional abuse, and can include making comments about a person's gender or sexuality that deliberately makes them feel uncomfortable, calling a person names or teasing them, kicking, hitting, punching or physically hurting a person, inappropriate sexual comments or gestures, refusing to work or cooperate with someone because of their real or perceived sexual orientation, making nasty comments about a person online, mocking or imitating someone's voice or mannerisms, etc. In order to understand the impact of anti-LGBT bullying, we are going to watch a few short clips of some young people talk about their own experiences. Whilst you're watching the videos, I'd like you to think about the following things. How did bullying make the person feel? How do you think it changed how they felt about their identity? And how did it impact their daily lives?
Younger, especially at that age, it's not your priority to think about stuff like that. You just know it, but you don't. I didn't feel like I needed to mention it either. But then as you get older, the consequences of being gay then become more apparent. So then when I joined secondary school, I had the fortune of joining an all-boys school. And as a closeted gay kid, you can imagine how difficult that would have been. At that time, people used to say negative things about being gay all the time. The word gay itself was just associated with so many negative connotations. There was literally no kid that I knew who wouldn't say, oh, that's gay, this is gay, like to describe something that they didn't like. And so when you're an impressionable young child and you're hearing that from your peers around you, the people that you see on a daily basis, you're going to let that affect you really badly. So immediately then, even though before that, when I was younger, I knew not to speak about it, but then as I got older, I then realised, oh, actually, it's probably a good thing that I don't speak about it anymore or at all, because it's obviously something negative. It's not something that you're supposed to be. It's something that people look down upon. It's something that people don't accept. It's something that people don't like. And then that filled me with a lot of, you know, anxiety and self-hatred of the fact that I was gay, basically. And I didn't really know what to do with it. You knew that, like, if I ever mentioned anything about my sexuality to anybody, I'm going to open myself up to bullying from all these kids, and I don't want to be bullied because nobody wants to be bullied. So then when you're living with that fear, it really, really begins to degrade your self-esteem, because ultimately you're denying a part of yourself and you're not allowing yourself to be who you are, essentially. And therefore, my self-esteem started to degrade because I was literally not being my total self every day. I was waking up every day, going to school, pretending to be somebody and lying about myself all the time. When boys started talking about girls eventually, you know, be like, oh, this girl's fit, that girl's fit. You know, you have to pretend and join in that conversation. You have to be like, yeah, you know, she is. But then you're lying to yourself and you're lying to them and you feel like a bad person. And then, you know, you're a young teenager. You haven't got this sort of emotional intelligence to deal with all these things of pretending to be somebody you're not, right? When you're like, what, 12 to 16. And then it just really degraded my self-esteem, and it led to really poor mental health at the time. And I really wasn't able to cope for a while because it got quite dark, to be honest. I wasn't happy with life. I wasn't, I just didn't want to be there, essentially. And that's how it felt.
But moving up to year 7 is a scary experience for everyone, because when you're in primary school, you know everyone and your school is quite small and you're used to routine. And then moving up to year 7, you go into this massive school with hundreds, thousands of people you don't know, and you're the youngest out of like 7 years, like year groups, and it's completely alien to you. So I felt isolated and alone enough. But during that first week, I remember 2 boys in my tutor group followed me as I was walking home, and they threw sticks and stones at me and called me a lesbian repeatedly and slapped me in the face. Which, as hard as dealing with being a year 7 is, it's much harder when you're having to deal with experiences like that. It made me feel vulnerable, it made me feel like a victim, and I didn't want to be that. I just wanted to, you know, adjust to this new school. And it was the first of plenty of other events that happened. People would refuse to touch me because they said I had a disease, or I'd often hear like gay being used as an insult. So that's so gay being used to describe something negatively, and that hurts more than at first you think it would. And even if it's not meant in a homophobic way, it's still associating being gay with something negative when all that someone means is the word stupid. And that hurts because if you overhear that sort of language, it encourages this stigma around being a part of the LGBT community, and it made me feel more alone, which was awful because I felt quite alone in my home life. My family aren't very open to the LGBT community, so I didn't have that safe space at home. So not having that safe space at school as well was made me feel very alone, very isolated. I missed most of my year 9 due to mental illness, and my counsellor didn't think I'd actually go back to school. I thought I'd end up being some dropout. Almost in spite, I felt like it was important that I went back and tried to make something of myself. It's easy to give up, and I didn't want to take the easy route. When it comes
So having listened to those young people's experience, in practical terms, what can we do to help make our school a safer place? Love as Brethren means showing care and compassion for all members of our school community. One of the key things to remember is how hurtful homophobic, biphobic or transphobic language can be. It's very important to deal with derogatory terms used to describe LGBT plus people. But casual comments said in passing, such as describing a negative situation as gay, can also be very damaging. It's incredibly widespread. 90% of young people have at least once used the word gay in a negative context. The presence of homophobic language is strongly linked to bullying. In schools where students frequently hear homophobic language, 68% of gay pupils are bullied, as opposed to 37% in schools where homophobic language is rarely or never heard. So it's up to all of us to make sure that we create the conditions where homophobic language and homophobic bullying is not welcome and not acceptable. If you hear someone use this kind of language, challenge it. Ask them why they chose to describe a situation like this and not by using another word, such as annoying or bad. This can make them realise how inappropriate the word is in this context. If they don't have a problem with gay people, why would they associate the word gay with such negative connotations? Of course, you also need to be aware of your own language, and if you have used this kind of language yourself, it's important to realise the damage it can do and to stop using it now. There are other ways that language can be insensitive, including words that are suggestive of gender stereotypes, such as telling someone to man up or grow a pair, can be particularly upsetting when directed at someone transgender. Again, challenge the use of this sort of language, as many people have never thought about how it might be hurtful and damaging. Now let's take a moment to think about what you might do if you witnessed anti-LGBT plus bullying. Would you intervene? If you felt safe and comfortable to do so, especially within school, I would absolutely encourage you to challenge someone making homophobic, biphobic or transphobic comments. If it's one of your friends doing it, then I think it's your duty to do so. By standing by and doing nothing while one of your friends behaves in this way, you are tacitly approving of their behaviour. If you did not feel able to challenge the perpetrator, you could tell someone in school, and at the end of the assembly, I'll identify some of the different adults you can speak to. If you're in a public place, it may be appropriate to report it to the police. Many football clubs, for example, have systems for reporting abusive behaviour by text message. If you're being bullied in this way, you need to tell your parents or report it to someone in school. You should keep a diary of the comments or behaviours. If you're being bullied online or via social media, take screenshots and keep them as evidence to show your parents, the school or the police. If you feel unable to speak to your parents or a teacher, perhaps there is someone else you trust you can speak to and they can help. If you feel able to, ignore the bullying so you are not giving the bully the reaction that they're looking for. Please note that if you feel they could get aggressive, do not put yourself at risk by challenging them, as your safety is more important. If this bully spills over into threats or violence, then it should be reported to the police as a hate crime. Many police forces have specialist units to deal with these incidents. Coming to terms with being gay or trans and coping with it can be difficult enough for many young people. It can be even harder if this has to be done in secret because of the fear of a negative reaction from other people. LGBT plus people of all ages can become emotionally exhausted by having to deal with how they are feeling inside, plus having to cope with the problems of other people have coming to terms with their sexual orientation. Everyone should be able to be who they are, to love who they love, and to live their lives without judgment or fear. So what about in our school? Your form tutors and head of year are the first and most obvious source of support in the school pastoral system, but there are many other options for people to report or seek support in school. The safeguarding team is led by Mrs. Caron, and they all wear yellow lanyards. If at any point you are concerned for the safety and well-being of yourself or someone else in school, you should speak to a member of the safeguarding team. There are a number of other members of the pastoral support team for each key stage who you can talk to. Mrs. Kite is one example for students in year 7 to 11. We recently launched the mental health team. These are members of staff who have been specially trained to support people with their mental health and well-being, and they all wear purple lanyards. There are also a large number of trained sixth form peer mentors you could talk to, either by approaching them or through a referral by a head of year or Miss Smith. The peer mentors wear black school uniforms and yellow lanyards. Should you experience unkind words or actions towards you that are rooted in your identity as a member of the LGBT plus community, there is a safe space for you every Thursday in DR2 with Miss Smith and other students. Likewise, if you are an ally to someone who you know or suspect might be included in the LGBT plus community, why not suggest going together? That in itself is an act of kindness. The group meet informally and lots of students are already attending, taking part in different activities that allow for all students from different year groups to mix and share experiences. There is a place for everyone at CCCS. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you've developed your understanding of the impact of LGBT plus bullying and recognise that our ethos, Love as Brethren, demands that you do your bit to make our school a safe place for all members of our community.